All right, we're going to go ahead and get started because we've got a lot to cover this morning. First off, good morning and thank you so much for joining our discussion on the Ownership Advantage, Learn How Employee Owners Drive Results. I'm Trish Slossman, a Marketing and Growth Advisor here at KSM, and I'd like to introduce our speaker for today. But before we get started, I'd like to share the usual housekeeping notes, which should be pretty familiar to you all, so just bear with me. First, this webinar is being recorded and the recording and slides will be available in LC Vista for on-demand viewing. If you have any questions during the webinar, please use the chat feature. We will try to answer them as we go, but if you submit a question and we're not able to respond during the presentation, we'll contact you after the event if you have included your name and it's not marked as anonymous. The webinar does qualify for CPE, so please log in using the QR code shown on the screen or navigate to the conference's IO web address listed in the bullet points and choose the Ownership Advantage session. You'll first check in and then enter the code words that appear in the slides throughout the presentation. You must attend the webinar for at least 50 minutes and enter at least 3 of the 4 code words into Conferences IO to receive full credit. Please remember to select checkout at the end of today's webinar. Certificates will be available in LC Vista in the next few weeks. Now on to today's presentation. I'd like to introduce Steve Baker with The Great Game of Business. Steve is a nationally recognized author, speaker, and coach with more than 20 years of experience helping high-growth companies drive stronger financial results and meaningful cultural change. He has co-authored 2 powerful books on open book management and business literacy titled Get in the Game, How to Create Rapid Financial Results and Lasting Cultural Change, and the 20th anniversary edition of the bestseller, The Great Game of Business. Steve has shared his expertise with audiences ranging from Harvard and MIT to the Department of Defense and organizations like Entrepreneurs Organization, YPO, Vistage Worldwide, and the INC 5000. He also serves on the faculty of the Growth Institute and is a sought-after expert on leadership and employee engagement. With his experience and proven ability to inspire change, we're happy to have him here with us today. Steve, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Well, thank you, Trish. Appreciate it very much. And I don't know, that was probably the best introduction I've ever written. No. It's a real pleasure, you guys. I had an opportunity to come out and work with KSM at one of the trucking conferences. And I mean, I got to tell you, it's wonderful to be working with employee owners and with folks who are helping companies become better. So I want to welcome you. Thank you for the time, and hopefully you'll get a lot out of it, not just as CPE credits, but also something you can use yourself. As Trish recommended, I would highly recommend that you use the chat feature because I'm going to try to keep an eye on that and answer questions and keep this as interactive as humanly possible. We are here today to answer this question. What if people acted like they owned the place? What would be different? How would the financials be different? What would the culture be like? What about activities in general and just the vibe of the organization? To me, it's a significant shift away from a victim mentality and sort of like this entitlement that is so insidious in our culture as a country today. What I want to do is focus on how do you create a culture of ownership, but also how do you create a culture of winning? I think we can all agree that not everybody that comes into your offices every day or joins a Zoom meeting had a great day yesterday or a great night at home. What I want to do is create a culture where we consistently win, consistently outperform the market, and constantly are improving not only the results for the organization, but for the results for the individuals and their families and on into their communities. The problem we run into is that we're rarely playing the same game and we don't speak the same language. So let's talk about that. What is the difference? What's the language and what are the goals of owners versus employees? And that's what we're trying to do is shift thinking away from an employee thought pattern and into an ownership mindset. So owners worry about things like cash and competition and tariffs, all of these kinds of things, all the stuff that makes for a great company. Unfortunately, what employees worry about is, will I get a check? Will it cash? And will I get one next week? Now that makes it sound like I don't like employees. Gosh, I've been one my whole life since I was 15. The thing is, no one ever had the time or the inclination to teach me that everything I wanted as an employee, a great job, great benefits, career opportunities, some vision for where I'm going in the future, and an opportunity to pursue it. Well, everything that I wanted came from a growing, vibrant, and profitable business. In other words, what someone needed to teach me all those years ago was that the bottom of the list comes from the top of the list. If you can create a business that is built for long-term sustainability and growth, that allows us to create leadership opportunities in the future, to spread and diversify our offerings, but basically to create a place where you could feel, act, and believe that you are an owner. By the way, for the HR folks on the call here, this is not an encouragement to sleep with your employees. This is a visual metaphor. What if people acted like they owned the place? Man, wouldn't things be different? And so that takes us to this idea of the great game of business and why we believe that ownership truly is an advantage, and how employees are the ones that drive the numbers every single day in our organizations, no matter what business we're in. I am coming to you live from Springfield, Missouri. That's headquarters for SRC Holdings. We're a top 100 ESOP. So we're very similar to you guys in the sense that we are 100% employee owned S Corp ESOP. Our company is now made up of 11 businesses. I am now free to share with you that we just started a new joint venture with Genie, the folks who make aerial lifts. And we're going to be teaching them how they remanufacture their own products. We also have a joint venture with Case New Holland. We have one with Ceramex, which is a UK firm. We've had two with John Deere. The thing is, why do we do this sort of thing? We're trying to create an opportunity for folks to grow and to learn, and if they choose to become part of something really significant and that's growing and that will last not just the 40 plus years that we've been in business, but going forward as well. Could we be another 40 years or 100 years? Wouldn't it be great to think about that? So who is SRC? All the other companies except the great game of business, we're the educational arm, if you will. All of the other guys and gals out there, we have 2,000 people in these 11 companies. We remanufacture for some of the biggest OEMs on the planet. You probably know many of these, but what is remanufacturing? We can talk about that, but you have to start by going back to the late 70s and early 80s when the US economy was in tatters. And everybody who's on the call now that's below the age of 30, I just want you to listen to these stats. Imagine being one of the folks that was at SRC in those early days, when here's Jack Stack and his part of his leadership team. They were facing layoffs from International Harvester. 17% unemployment, 12% inflation. Can you imagine this? Interest rates topped out at 22%. You need to go hug an old person. So if you see anyone in the hallways with gray hair, just give them a big hug and say, I understand it was hard then. The thing is, they didn't even know how bad they had it. These guys, so Jack himself started out in Chicago, Illinois at International Harvester. And he was sent down to Springfield, Missouri. Here's a picture of the original factory that is still here in Springfield. He was sent down to close the factory. This was the International Harvester Reman facility where they remanufactures the engines and engine components that broke down in the farm fields and in the over-the-road trucks and construction sites all over North America. And these guys were the best in the world at what they did. The problem was that Jack was sent to close them down because International was laying off 1,000 people a week. And they did it for 2 years straight. Imagine that. 100,000 families lost their livelihood because International believed that command and control was the answer. When Jack got to Springfield, what he realized was there was a bunch of really good blue-collar Ozark people that basically were there doing a great job. They were crushing every metric that International sent down to Springfield. Best on-time delivery, best warranty rate, best safety record, best quality. Everything that they thought, their KPIs that were the measures of success, didn't increase their opportunity to keep a job. And so Jack was like, maybe we could make a run at the place. Maybe we could buy our own jobs and our own job security. How much did International want? He found out they wanted $9 million. He and 12 other managers could only scrape together 100 grand. So if you're doing the math, and I know you are, that's 89 to 1 debt to equity. Banks thought he was crazy because he would come in with his papers, his specifications of a great engine, and they were looking for the specifications of a great company. While he was there to save 119 jobs, they were there to collect interest. He had to learn their language. What he learned from the banks was, how can you play a game, much less win it, if you don't even know what game you're in? Remember this visual, because it's very important to remember that even though you guys are a top accounting firm and everyone works in numbers every day. The thing is, do they really understand what makes a great company? And do they understand how their personal work affects the big numbers of the business? I mean, it would be very easy for Tricia Schlossman to say, well, I'm in marketing. Well, I'm a cost center. I don't make money. I spend it. That would be easy to do, right? But that's not the way Tricia thinks of it. She thinks about the business like an owner. Now, the problem is, again, how do you get people to play the game with you when they don't even know the rules, as Jack didn't in those early days? What he learned from the banks, he kept getting turned down because he didn't know the specifications of a great company. So he had to figure out what their game was, but he also figured out what their language was. And this is the guy. This is Luca Pacioli, who in 1494 popularized the income statement and the balance sheet that we still use today. Now, I think this is crazy because everyone uses these documents. We use the same system in every country, every political system, every ideology, all geography. I can't read this balance sheet, but man, I can balance it. And look how happy it made Brother Luca. You guys, the thing is, how is it that we can have the system that separates the haves and have-nots, and yet very few people have access or understanding of what they are? Now, if you've ever been to a bank when you didn't know their language, and I'm talking about myself in the early days when we tried to buy a house, they kept asking me dumb questions like, when are you going to pay the money back? And are you a good credit risk? I didn't know. I needed a home, and I thought it was their responsibility to give it to me. Well, in reality, Jack was learning the same thing back in the early 80s, right? He was trying to save 119 jobs. 18 months and 54 banks later, he finally figured out enough to know what a cash flow statement was, how to write a business plan, because in that year and a half, and all of those rejections, he learned by trial and error. And he figured out what I've got to do is I've got to teach them that I know what a great company is. And this is a huge takeaway for today. What I want you to do is remember this: the worst corporate buyout in American history happened probably by accident, but also through Jack's tenacity. And that was February 1st, 1983, with three kids in diapers, about 29 or 30 years old, and a $200 a month mortgage. He woke up after closing the deal, right? But here's the deal: $8.9 million against $100,000 down at the deal rate of 18%. Now he's got something like what, $130,000 of interest expense due in 28 days? Can you imagine the pressure and how alone he must have felt? It's not that he wasn't talking to his people, but his people were great technicians. And great technicians, I don't care if they turn a wrench or write code or help people with their taxes or help customers by advising them. What I'm telling you is they wanted to be left alone. Give me the tools and get the hell out of my way. The bottom line is this: if I've got someone writing code, if I've got someone turning a wrench, I've got to appeal to their higher level of thinking and say, we've got to figure out how to make this bank loan payment or the jobs are gone. So this is a big deal. Remember this, please. Another big takeaway here: the company is actually your product. It's not the stuff you make. It's not the service you provide. The company is actually the product. And ladies and gentlemen, at KSM, you guys are employee owned. You literally have an equity position in the business that most companies, 999 out of 1,000 in the United States, will never have an opportunity to do. That's right. In the US, ESOPs represent 1 in 1,000 companies. It is crazy. So you have a responsibility not only to yourself, but to your other employee owners who should be able to say, yeah, we're building a great company, but you're going to have to create an accelerated learning program, an education around building a great company. What does it mean and how does it work and what do those numbers need to be? You're also going to need the responsibility and accountability. And so that is, to me, what I consider to be where ownership lives or dies. If you don't have an accountability rhythm and a discipline to accountability, it's all going to go away. They're always going to wonder, well, does it matter? Totally matters. So then we've got, what about what's in it for me? If I learn all your stuff about business and then we hold each other accountable, we make promises to each other, well, what's in it for me? Well, in the early days, it was you got to keep your job. But and very, very quickly, in a matter of months, they realized it was much more than that. What are the incentives? What's in it beyond just a job? Can I participate in this thing. And so I'm going to walk you through each of those areas: education, accountability, and incentives. But first, our strategy is important. We want to build a business of business people who think and act and feel like the owners do. Now, ladies and gentlemen, it's time for secret code word number one. That's 718. As you can see on the screen, you'll need to go into your app and make sure that you're getting your CEUs. So 718, if you remember that, highly recommend you get your CEUs, because not only is this incredibly entertaining and educational, but you get your hours too. So let's talk about the principles. Remember I told you about education, accountability, and incentives? Well, here is the model. Now, the reason that Jack had to do this is because with great technicians resisting learning about business, right? Let the bean counters count the beans. Let me do what I've been doing for all these years, or let me do what and by the way, I've heard this from cardiac surgeons as well as people working on the line at SRC. I went to medical school. I don't need to learn all that stuff. Yeah, you probably do if you want to be a cardiac surgeon for a long time. The thing is, Jack's own people were resisting it. And he said, well, I know one thing for sure. We're all competitive. We're a game playing nation, and business is no different than games. We have a critical number, one team goal. If we don't do this, nothing else matters. It defines winning, and that's the critical number. Then we have to teach about the critical number. What is it? How did we get to it? How do I affect it? What's my line of sight? And then follow the action, keep score. Do we behave differently when we keep score? Absolutely. And finally, what's in it for me? I probably sound very greedy, don't I? But I hope you're a little bit greedy. I hope you're self-interested enough to want to build not only your short-term incentives, things like bonuses and that sort of thing, but also what about that long-term incentive, your stock price? I was just telling the team when we got started in the webinar that we just got our stock certificates yesterday. And I'm pretty darn excited because I didn't put $1 in that. And yet it's probably the largest wealth creation event in my life. So what is it that we can do? We've got to teach. Ownership must be taught. It's not a magic pill. Now, I want you to go back. If you start in the center of this thing, the critical number, sometimes they're screaming at you. In the early days of SRC, it was, if you don't make this bank loan payment, everybody's gone. And at 17% unemployment, you got a problem. So if you put that at the center of the game, how would you communicate it? The way Jack did it is he used common sense, much like this approach of a game anyway. He wanted to demystify business and not to trivialize it, but just to take the mystery out. And what he wanted to do was say, why does business get to be this elite sport for the select few that keeps everyone else in the dark and out of the money? So using the analogy of a game, he said, well, I'm just going to go out into all my departments and I'm going to teach them what that critical number is, make the bank loan payment. And every department had to come up with an idea of how can we help make the bank loan payment. So the engineers had to come up with their way. The safety people had to come up with their way. HR, marketing, everyone had to do it. And in fact, what he was looking for was how can I get out to all the teams that represent that department and all the people in those teams? Because if you look at the little red dot on the lower right part of your screen, that represents that one person who might be, again, writing important computer code in a dark basement somewhere. I just to picture that in my mind. It could also be an engineer who's engineering out a manufacturing flaw. It could be anyone doing anything. It could be someone in a truck doing a route. The thing is, man, I'm telling you, if you don't understand how you can help your team, and if they don't understand how the team helps the department, all the way back to the critical number, you're missing line of sight. To us, that's that unobstructed view to a goal. Now, sometimes it's not a straight line, and our job as leaders is to have the right questions and ask a lot. Find out, what is it you don't understand? How can I help you understand? Because the people on the front line absolutely create the numbers in the business. It's not from the C-suite. They help to set goals and they lead us. But frankly speaking, it's you and me that are making those numbers happen. So I want to walk you through each of these and then give you some examples. And I want to leave you with a couple of training bites. These are things that we call training bites because how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. How do you teach this stuff in the flow of work? I have to assume everyone on this webinar is probably thinking the same thing. When will I have time to do all of this crap? Honestly, you're going to have to do it every day, a little bit while you're working, just thinking and acting and feeling more like an owner. So our first uh, principle, if you will, of the game is, well, if we're going to have a critical number, we need to know and teach the rules. And this is where financial transparency comes in. For any of you who know about the great game of business, you probably know us as the open book management people. I will tell you, we're not big fans of that word because it infers that if you just open the book, someone's going to care. They won't. Frankly, I don't think most people would understand what they would see anyway. You guys might be different because you're an accounting firm, but I will tell you, you can't assume anything. You just can't. And so we have to create that transparency, but you've got to combine it with education because alone transparency is worthless. It's just more numbers being thrown at people. Well, what does that look like in real life? I don't need more people to know the score. I need people who can change the score, right? So think about that. If you're just sharing numbers, all you're doing is creating more fans. I need players. I need people who are in the arena making the difference every single day. Personal finance guru Dave Ramsey says that money flows from people who do not understand it to people who do. I want my kids to be the people who do. I want my coworkers to be the people who do. I want the people at KSM to be the people who do know how money works. And I don't mean just in a sense of how do we help clients, but also how do we build the best company possible and drive our value up. The second principle is, of course, follow the action and keep score. As I've pointed out, we behave differently when we're measuring things. So this is where our scoreboards, our huddling, and our forward forecasting come to life. So examples are you might be someone like 1-800-GOT-JUMPED and you do your producers and you stand up and you keep that going. Well, I showed this picture to a software company in Canada, and what I love is they're like, yeah, Steve, we're scientists. We write software for satellites. We work in the stars. I mean, I'm serious. And I'm not making fun of them because they're awesome players. Today's huddle looks like this. To me, it's the same huddle. It's just different numbers. They chose to be, they're engineers, software developers, people writing codes, people writing grants, right? Scientific grants. The beauty of it is they decided, well, we're producers too. And we actually charge a lot of the people in their group charge by the hour. Let's stand up so we keep it to the numbers, crisp out the door, back to work. Once a week, it's a tight meeting and it can happen anywhere, even remotely. Here's an accounting firm in Dallas called Venturity. Their business model is to have their people embedded in small businesses who haven't yet got that accounting function. The beauty of it is they've learned since Zoom, before Zoom was a company, how to have a remote huddle. And by the way, none of us get an excuse, do we? We all have a phone in our pocket. These are people who are on my tour bus during one of our great game experience um, workshops here in Springfield. This is from last November, Mission Mobile Medical. They were attending their huddle and putting in their forecasts via their phone. I thought that was amazing. Because the thing is, we forecast everything because that gives us an opportunity to really be self-determined, to control our own future by forecasting the numbers. You can't run your business by looking backwards. It is important. And at KSM, as historians for most companies, what I want you to do also is encourage people to be looking forward. Use history as a lesson and as tuition, but we can't change it. So what we want to do is use that knowledge and that wisdom to look forward in the business. Finally, what's in it for me? You guys, my favorite thing in the world at Christmas time is to watch this movie. Tell me, somebody throw it in the chat, would you? What was the plot element, the device that really drove the story here? Can anyone show me that? I'm just going to see if anyone's paying attention. What drove the whole story on Christmas Vacation? Yes, thank you, David, John, Aaron. Um, there it is. Harry got it. So look, you're all right. It was about the bonus, about jelly of the month and everything, but Harry got it. Harry, you get bonus fake points. Here's the thing. Clark W. Griswold was digging a hole for a pool he could not afford based on a bonus he wasn't even sure was going to arrive. How many Clark W. Griswolds are on KSM's payroll today? He wasn't a bad guy, right? He was some kind of food scientist creating a non-nutritive food shellac or something. Yeah, exactly. Well, he got the jelly of the month, Harry. You're right. The thing is that he considered that to be an entitlement. In fact, the quote is, every year for 17 years, we've gotten a bonus. We expect it as part of our salary. That is someone who's talking like an employee, not thinking like an owner. And so what I want to do is I want to challenge you to think about your bonus plans, your mini games, your long-term ESOP as being aligned quantities. In other words, if the stake in the outcome includes health benefits, pay, bonuses, the ESOP is the long term. Are we aligning the goals of the business with the rewards that we're paying? Just make sure your short term, midterm, and long term rewards are indeed lining up with the goals you're trying to get. So that's a quick look at the whole thing. And thank you guys so much for participating. Please put some questions into the chat. We'll answer them within the flow of our workshop here today. What I wanted to do next was talk a little bit about what you can actually do. How do you put it into practice and give you some exercises? Before we get into that, I'm going to take a moment, just about 20 or 30 seconds. Our second code word is 416. 416. Get that down. You can jot it on a piece of paper and we'll keep moving. All right, 416, guys. Here we go. So my question, if I were in your seat, is, okay, this is really cool. And if you're watching the recording, I hope you're watching it at like 1.9 speed because I sound smarter. But what you want to do is slow down enough to say, well, just do something different than you did before. Here's an example. Voltaire said the perfect is the enemy of the good. And when you talk about the great game of business or trying to teach anyone about financial ownership, think about business literacy, think about anything that you're trying to teach, you got to get started sometime. If you make a perfect plan, you probably miss the opportunity to teach it. And so what I want to do is introduce you to one of our training bites. And I mentioned before the old saying, how do you eat an elephant? Well, we don't eat the whole thing at once. For us, because a lot of our companies are in remanufacturing, we have a lot of blue collar people that are hourly workers, and we can't take them off the line to have them sit down for a half day financial literacy course. We do have those, by the way, at all levels of business. However, it is rare that we can do it. Besides, people only retain like 20% of formal education. So I need 70%, which is what the stats say, of what you retain by learning on the job. So follow along with me and remember that this is just one of many training bites that we constantly use to teach not only our own people at SRC, but also companies in every sector, in every marketplace around the world. And that the way we start is we say, well, how do you make money? How do you bring money into the organization? And so I would ask our salespeople to come through this. For you guys, it might be, well, we do have tax preparation, but we also have advisory and onward. For a great game of business, it might be our annual conference we've had for 30 years, our workshops, speaking and training, our coaching, and that represents it. For other folks, it might be service 1, 2, 3, 4, or region north, south, east, west. These are the buckets of revenue, the things that we do where we make promises to customers about deliverables, and then that is our revenue. If we do this for you, you give us money. Unfortunately, we don't all just have zero costs. And I don't know anyone who doesn't have expenses. So what we have to do is when we're teaching this, I'll actually do it on a flip chart, and I will ask the people responsible for each line item to tell me what that is. Now, here's where we get into cost of goods sold. Now, for an accounting firm, you might say, well, it's all billable hours, Steve. That's what it is. It's all billable hours. For an engineering firm, not much different. For a construction company, it might be direct labor, direct materials, that sort of thing. But the thing is, we have to teach people what that means. Even if they have seen it a million times, we have to explain the acronym, cost of goods sold. And we can tell them, the thing is that Luca Pacioli, 500 years ago, gave us this very simple scorecard for business. And this is literally a simplified income statement. Because if I take revenue minus COGS, it's not hard math. I can get my gross margin if it's a percent, expressed as dollar, it's gross profit. And now we can look at expenses. And we can list those, and it can go on and on. And as transparent and open book as we are, we don't share salary information on an individual basis. No, that would be divisive. What we do is we share salaries and benefits, or SG&A, and companies around the globe share it differently. but it's up to you how that looks. But we can also explain all of the other expenses. There's Trisha and marketing right there. And what about HR and IT? So what I want you to do is just imagine if this were your numbers, and it doesn't have to be a chart of accounts, guys. It doesn't. You don't want to see people's faces melting off their skull. I want them to understand that every number here is represented, but not every number may be detailed. The thing is, I want them to be a part of it and see themselves in the income statement, because your first year out when you play the game, man, it's really powerful because this is an organizational chart. Every single person is represented somewhere on here, whether it's in their work, their day-to-day work, the impact that they have on a line, or their salaries and benefits. And so if we use the example of a bottom line of net profit, and it's just an example, I want you to answer this question in the chat for me. If I have a dollar and we say that for 2025, our plan was to make 10 cents on the dollar. And I'll warn you, in remanufacturing, we're so asset heavy, we are so capital intensive that we make about a nickel on the dollar. For our example, I'm going to use a dime. How many, if I want to see a dollar profitability at the bottom line, how many must I sell at the top line in revenue at 10-cent profitability? Can someone throw that? And it can't be just Harry, and it can't be just Liz and John and Aaron and David. So let's see some more. The question is, if I bring in a dime out of every dollar as profitability, how many do we have to sell at the top line to get a dollar of profit at the bottom? Go ahead and throw it in the chat. All right. I am not surprised at all. Yes. Did you see what I didn't do, though? I didn't give you the answer. And the reason is I want people to do some mathing. You know what I mean? Essentially, yeah, here's the deal. It's 10 cents. That's easy math for us. But do you think that everyone will get it at exactly the same moment? I don't think so. I've never seen it in the 20 years I've been doing this. But you have to just work through it with them, help them understand what that looks like. And here's the reason it's powerful. And then I'll follow this exercise up, this training bite up with examples. So the cool thing is you may have noticed I just added a column. This is the column that Brother Luca Pacioli forgot 500 years ago, a column for someone's name, because someone owns every single line item on this income statement, don't they? So our org chart is literally being filled out as we build a scorecard for the business. And now I can appeal to people's higher level of thinking by saying, you know what? If we could reduce our costs, if we could make sure that we bill for every hour, if capture every hour that we're actually giving to our clients and make sure it gets documented appropriately, if we can be more better, yeah, welcome to the Ozarks. If we can be better stewards of our expenses, every line there has a multitude effect. In other words, a dollar not spent doesn't become a dime. A dollar captured remains a dollar. And that means everything that we do in the organization is worth 10 times what we thought it was. Now, this is an important disclaimer. The great game of business is not lean. It is not Six Sigma. It's not about cutting costs. It is about stewardship. It is about line item ownership. And it is about individual line of sight to that critical number, in this example of profitability. And I'm going to tell you it matters. So let me share an example. And I want to thank everybody, by the way, for your responses. It's really great to see everybody participating. Some of you may know HEB. This is a company that, I mean, I'm just telling you, the updated numbers, they have 146,000 people in Texas. Can you believe that? They are big. They are Texas, in fact, because they're really powerful. They hired us to come in and teach the things that we're talking about here. Yeah, financial literacy, sure. Yes, business literacy, but also ownership literacy, because after more than a century of being family owned, they decided to share a little bit of equity with their teams. And guess what? This is what they learned. We were doing 600 to 800 people at a time, going town to town and region to region because they have so many people. So it was a huge road show, and we would teach a whole day. And it was all about that ownership literacy, financial literacy, business literacy. They would learn about why we try to stack avocados in a certain way, because if they go bad, we have to get rid of them. And then someone came up with the idea of, why don't we make our own guacamole before they go bad? And they actually got a value add. They also figured out that selling a watermelon, you make this much. Selling a sliced up watermelon in a beautiful crystal clear package, you get this much profit. I will never buy a non-whole watermelon again now that I've learned the inside. But here's the thing, about the third training in, I started hearing stories about how people were applying this training, and I can never forget the story of the grape. A kid in a produce department in San Antonio apparently interrupted his boss and his boss's boss and the regional manager, his boss's boss's boss, during a conversation in the produce department to walk across the aisle and pick up a single grape. The question came from the regional manager. It's like, explain? And he goes, well, you might have thought I just picked it up because we like to keep a clean store. Hospitality is one of our core values. But the reality is what I learned in the training a few weeks ago was that the average slip and fall at HEB settles for $5,000. At 2-cent profitability, which is pretty normal in the grocery industry, they have to sell $50 in revenue to get $1 of profit. That $5,000 represented a sale of 250,000 groceries that would have to happen. And this is a kid in the produce department. Now, that kid was thinking like an owner, wasn't he? Because it would have been very easy to kick it under display or just ignore it or whatever. It probably isn't going to be a slip and fall, but that kid took that business literacy, what a slip and fall cost, which is what he learned in the training. The second one was financial literacy. Oh, what would that really encompass? And then ownership literacy of, if I can keep this money in here, that's 250, $250,000 we don't have to sell. And in other words, if we could sell it, it adds to the value of my personal stake in the company. What's really crazy is you might be thinking, what the hell, Steve? What does a grocery store have to do with it? It's not just people in produce. It's not just people in the deli. There's also the Washington Post called HEB one of the top 10 tech companies to work for in Texas. Right? Think about it. E-commerce, curbside, delivery, all of that stuff is happening at the same time. And so what I want you to take away is everybody can touch a line item. They probably already own one and don't even know about it or don't think about it as being that important. Remember, it's not the stuff you make and the service you provide. The company is your product. So now it's time to take a breather. Start thinking about what questions you want to ask. Get them in the chat. Our secret code word number 3 is 174. 174. We're getting there, guys. Jot that down because we're going to keep moving. What I want you to do next is go with me on this little journey. I would like you to consider these questions as you go into the kind of the second half of the year, if you will. I want you to think about, are you really capturing all of the value that you're providing your clients? In other words, is it possible that it might not be getting grabbed? It might not be getting documented. Maybe it was just something look, I got to be honest. My wife is a speech language pathologist, has been for 35 years. She's terrible at keeping her own time records. She just wants to help the kids. But the reality is the agency that she works for really needs that because they need to be able to bill appropriately. And frankly speaking, she's not getting paid for the work she's doing. For you guys, this would be a personal affront to my personal equity stake in the business if we weren't all being great stewards of our time. Are we also looking for opportunities? What other services could our clientele be gaining from? Also, what if they could refer us to someone? Are you guys individually showing up as an owner? Be proud of it. Be part of that ownership mentality. And are we continuously improving? You wouldn't be on here on this webinar today if you weren't. You wouldn't be active, getting your CEUs, but you also have a choice. You could have not answered any of my questions in the chat. You're participating. You are thinking and acting like you're continuously improvement. And that is, to me, being an owner. And are you active or are you passive as an ESOP participant? This morning, we were talking to Christopher Robinson. He's been there for 5 months. He's in your IT department. Seems like an awesome guy. And guess what? He's going to learn more from you all about ownership than he will ever learn from an ESOP conference. I'm just telling you. And this is how people get infected with the idea, right? Of like, wow, this is really unique. 1 in 1,000, Steve? That's crazy. I'm more likely to die of a bee sting or something. Well, are you acting like an owner? Are you being active? Are you helping others, mentoring them? Are you asking the right questions? And then another quick training bite for you. If you're ever working with a client or with one of your coworkers who just doesn't understand what this little exercise looked like, what is your particular number? What I want you to do is I want you to ask the question, what is my magic number? What you will need is You will need to take your profitability plan number. In other words, the example here would be that would be your X. You would take 1 divided by, and let's pretend that yours is 0.06, 6 cents on the dollar, a 6% net profit. Well, then your number would be 1667, meaning that in this case, every dollar that we can keep in the company is worth 1667 in new revenue or new sales. If it was 17 cents on the dollar, your magic number is 855. The beauty of it is you can stick this number everywhere. Here at Great Game of Business, I got to tell you, Cindy Laska, our events manager, she has Post-it notes everywhere, especially on things like the refrigerator. So everyone knows what a Diet Coke costs when they take one out of the fridge. Now, look, someone could call her the Diet Coke Nazi, or someone could say she's thinking and acting and feeling like an owner. I prefer to think about that. Now, when you think about this, if our number is 5 cents on the dollar, as I told you before, and that means we have to generate 20 in sales at the top. I want to tell you a quick story, and then we'll take questions. This is Lauren Haley. I just got to tell you, I've known her for many years because our kids went to school together. But just look at that face. Is she not like beaming sunshine? This is what Lauren is. Actually, she goes by Lolo. And I just want you to know this. She has worked with us for several years, started very young, right out of school. And she came to me recently and she said, okay, so first of all, remember, we're a service organization, right? The Great Game of Business, we are a teaching, coaching, consulting organization. So we definitely are the same kind of world that KSM is, in the fact that, someone's going to pay us for essentially our thoughts, our mental capabilities. Now, Lauren came to me after being here for a couple of years and saying, hey, Steve, can you explain that dollar exercise to me again? I'm like going, oh my gosh, I must be the worst teacher in the world. This is so simple. But instead of saying that out loud, I used my inside voice and I said, Lauren, let's talk about it. And then you're going to tell me why. So I walked her through it again. And this is what happened. She goes, well, thank you for doing that. But here's why I asked, because I found out that the person who had my job before had subscribed to something called Searchy. I got to tell you, this is where the front line makes it all happen, because I don't even know what Searchy is or was, and I don't care. She needs to know what it is. Now, as the head of our Great Game of Business online community, she needed to know. She goes, well, what I found out was that we already have a subscription to Vimeo. We use a lot, and it has all the same features that Searchy did. Can I cancel Searchy? I'm like, that's thinking like an owner, right? It was an unused subscription that was just draining our dollars. She goes, well, it's $209 a month. If I'm doing the math right, that's 25 or 2,500 bucks a year. And I said, sounds good so far. So where are you taking it now? She goes, that means with our number, we would have to sell $50,000 more to make the same impact. I'm going to go turn that thing off right now. So in an instant, a flip of the switch, she was able to cancel an unused subscription with a $50,000 revenue impact. That, ladies and gentlemen, is like a level 1 coaching implementation at Great Game of Business. That's hard work and very difficult to come up with that sort of sales funnel. So the reason that it's so cool, as I said, you have to go do a training bite, meaning she had to do the dollar exercise for all of my team at the next huddle. When she did, guess what happened? People are like, wow, that was a great refresher. Thanks, some high fives. Plus, it took her out of her shell, right? As the leader of our online community, she doesn't have to interact with anyone in person. It's all electronic. This got her up in front of people. She was very confident. It's really been a great experience. But the best part is she what's the word I'm looking for? I was going to say incited a riot. No, but she inspired a riot of ideas, and people started looking for things. I just wanted to share you another one. This is Carlin Henson, our graphic designer, who, by the way, super sharp. And I happen to have an art degree myself. You can see one of my paintings behind me. But here's someone who studied art, is a graphic designer, and she saw that training bite and said, well, you know what? I also inherited a bunch of subscriptions from people. And what I want to do is also look at our domains. At Great Game of Business, we had 70 domains we were paying for. I know it looks like chump change. It seems like it, doesn't it? But what am I really after? I'm after an owner. Feeling, thinking, acting like an owner, and that starts small and it grows. Look at what Carlin found. 23 superfluous domains that we didn't need. She saved $297. Whoop-de-doo. But multiply that out by our magic number, it comes to almost 6 grand. Now, again, what I'm trying to tell you is I will take anything that I can get from people, but what I really wanted was what I got with Carlin. And that was, she said, I matter more. In fact, in our case, 20 times more than I thought I did. And who is better at making those decisions than someone on the front line? So that brings us to code word number 4, and that is 663. 663. That must be how many questions you have. So jot that down because we're going to go into our questions now. What I want to do is I want to ask, where are you at? Let's open it up, get in the chat. Tell me what you're thinking. What questions are coming up? What challenges do you have to all of this? I hope that someone will say, well, how do we even do this thing? Or what does it look like for a service organization? I feel like I've shared that with you, but there's a lot more stories that we can tell as well. So what do you got for me? Any questions? Let's get them in the chat. By now you should have your code word in. And while you develop your questions, I'm going to go ahead and tell you more stories until I see some questions there. Since we're talking about service organizations, I wanted to share this with you. We do something around the great game of business and in great game companies, again, in every industry you can imagine. What I wanted to do is bring some service organizations. Yeah, okay, great. Look at this. Am I a mind reader? Can you share an example? This comes from Jay Catman from a service organization. So let me do this. Imagine being a veterinary hospital, a service organization by definition, right? And this service, it touches us all. We all have pets and we all know we spend way too much money on them. When they get sick, though, they're part of the family. You take them somewhere special. This is Dr. Randy Spencer. By the way, they have 3 hospitals 24/7 in Phoenix, Arizona. Now, the reason I'm showing you this is because I want you to get out of your head. It's not just about accounting firms. It's about when you provide a service, you are charging a fee for that. And my choice is, if I'm going to go with KSM, I know I'm getting premium service, top level thinking, and the most on point technology. So why do I bring you a vet? It's because, is it Dr. Randy Spencer, the guy with the tie on, that was driving the numbers, or is it everyone else you see? Veterinarians who really care more about animals than they do numbers, technicians who care more about animals than numbers, and finally, what about the administration people, the people scheduling, the people running the back of house, the people, running the business, so to speak? Again, they all work there for a reason. Now, here's the thing. They created their very own, what we call mini games to drive frontline performance. The first thing they did is they said, well, we are underutilizing many services. In fact, this is called missed X-ray charges, a mini game where they create. Now imagine this. It looks silly, I know, but look at the impact. What they were doing is every time that they captured a certain number of X-rays that weren't being captured before, they got to bill for them. That means a better downstream profit event for the company. Another one was about selling Simparico Trio, a very special high-end flea and tick and heartworm medication. The thing is, look at this, tearing up my heart. It's disgusting. But I love it because someone had to make all the little worms. They had to make the heart, and then you get to pluck out the worms and stick them in the little pocket. The thing is, that had also a very big impact. What does it really mean? The thing is, their first year playing the game, they increased their revenue by 55%. And look at all the other numbers. Revenue per employee went up. They just had gone ESOP as well. Their EBITDA went up 184%, and their stake in the outcome almost 500%. They dropped their debt by a third and added 20 more jobs, you guys. It's huge. They were focused on building a better company. So let's see what new we're new to KSM. How does the firm share P&L info throughout the firm? Now, I got to be honest, Harry, thank you for that. I cannot answer that. It is a wonderful question for Tricia and the team, and I know that they are working on this right now. What I wanted to do is I thought I would share kind of the impact side, but I'm sorry I can't answer that specifically at this point, but I think that's something you look forward to in the future from the team. John, we're going to say, what 1 to 2 takeaways of information would you share with new hires about the benefits of ESOPs? Well, the first one is to change your thinking. Stop saying retirement and start saying wealth creation. That is my biggest piece of advice because as an ESOP participant, and I've been here 20 years, so I've seen significant appreciation. The thing is, dude, when I started at SRC, I was 40 years old and I was still questioning whether I needed health insurance. I was healthy, I was more focused on paying tuition and braces and all this sort of thing. So I needed more cash. Plus, I was woefully undereducated when it came to financials. And so I was thinking like an employee. That transition, John, from employee to owner takes a different amount of time for everyone. So think about it as a continuum. What are we doing now with communicating our salaries, our benefits, the cost of employing someone? Plus, what about all the other stuff we don't talk about? The EAP program. Maybe you have bonuses that you could teach about. But if you align those things to the value of the company, then when you talk about EBITDA, which again, you'll have to teach, what I'm going to say is, man, you know what? When you're new and you're young, these are things that have to be taught because no one ever talked to you about before. And the one thing they have been taught is that social media has taught everyone young that retirement is a farce. It is a fantasy. It's something from the past. So talk about wealth creation. You got a whole different conversation. I hope that helps. The other thing I would teach is that you are one in 1,000. In the United States, there are 6,500 ESOPs, roughly. If there's 6 million businesses, that's 0.0001, one in 1,000. Holy cow. Who's going to give them that opportunity? Almost no one. So what I want you to do is say you're really special because you got a unique opportunity here, but it's not a tomorrow thing. So start to align your short-term, midterm, and long-term rewards with the short-term, midterm, and long-term goals of the business. I hope that helps, John. And by the way, you'll probably see me in places like the NCEO and ESOP Association and other employee ownership organizations because I am passionate about this. Employee ownership has changed my life. So it's easy for me to be like this, like I am, because it has changed everything for me. And I'm trying to teach my kids, is that what you should look for in a company that you might work for? Because taking a job and staying with it for a long time is not the message most people are getting these days. So, John, all I can say is it's really big. I'm really glad that you guys are on the webinar with us today. But bottom line is, think about the game. How do you get people to pay attention? How do you get them to care? Well, you can't, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. Same with this. You're going to have to teach it. And my big takeaways for you today would be that build a business of business people who think and act and feel like owners do. Remember that the company is the product. And I think this is a big one. For us at SRC, we went from 119 people to 2,000. So it's our higher law of business. It's pretty easy to stop one person. It's impossible to stop 2,000. We're going to win, and we're going to create that ownership mindset. Let me share one last thing with you that might be helpful. Oh, wait, we got another question from Zach. What coaching and guidance do you provide businesses on creating culture through things that cost versus reducing expenses and cost saving? Zach, I'm going to paraphrase it, see if I got you right. In other words, it's not just cutting costs, but how do you also increase sales? Is that the question? I'm guessing that's it, but I'm going to talk and then you plug it in if I got it wrong. The thing is, when we teach people business, we are teaching them how to sell more, better, more deeply, and how to retain clients, how to find and retain talent. In other words, we're bringing it back to the business case. How do we make money and generate cash? How do we do it better and more efficiently? But also, how do we continue to grow? Because our sustainability is number one. How do we create a long-term growing and sustainable and profitable business so we can get everything we want of it as employees? Hope that makes sense. So it isn't just about cost cutting, but man, if that income statement is an org chart for the business, guess what? I'm going to be working the whole thing. It's just that most of the business is on the cost side. A very small business, very small number of people are usually on the revenue side. But at your organization, you are in a very unique position to upsell clients into services that they could benefit from. And so what I want to do is take away the stigma of, oh, sales, Nope, we are all salespeople. The thing is, I don't think of it as sales. I think of it as we're helping people better. So that is my personal approach. But I'm glad you brought it out because it reinforces what we said about, you know what? It all matters. It all falls to the bottom line eventually. And in an employee-owned company, if your bottom line was EBITDA, so we can tell how much the company is going to be valued at, that's a really valuable thing to talk about. I want to share this with you because you guys are kicking butt and you might not even know it. So you're going to learn this, and then we'll close out and we'll put the final CEU information up. This is what it looked like in 1983. We had mullets, we had bell bottoms, right? Now remember, I only started 20 years ago, but imagine if you were at SRC in 1983 when they started. This is what it looks like today. The S&P 500, you put $1,000 in your 401k, you'd have somewhere around 350. Warren Buffett, however, would give you somewhere around $4 million of return. Every $1,000 at SRC today is worth 14 million. And I'm updating that for you because we just got our stock certificates yesterday and it is pretty darn exciting. But you know what? KSM is no slouch, my friends. Look at this. These are their historical returns from 2001 to today. The S&P would give you 7.7% since 2001. Not a bad return. Warren Buffett, 10.9%. He's beaten the market. You know where KSM is? You guys are at a 19% return since 2001. Compared to SRC, we're at 13%. You're kicking our butt. So all I can say is thank you for letting me be a part of this. Do you have any openings? No. The bottom line, you guys, is you've been great. I appreciate all the questions and interactivity. I love it, and I hope that I can answer any questions for you in the future. What I want you to do is do not forget to check out before you leave. It's very important that you do that. And if you need me to, I'll put that QR code back up for you now. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. I've still got a couple of minutes. If there are any other questions, I would gladly answer them. If you need to hop off, I understand that as well. Thank you for being here. I really appreciate it. Well,
Steve,
Liz, thank you.
yeah. Sorry, I was going to say, Steve, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your expertise. Certainly has given us a lot to think about, and we look forward to putting some of these tips into practice here at KSM.
Thanks so much, guys.
Sure. Thank you. Have a great week, everyone.